Hello, I'm Tony, and I thought I ought to give you a little introduction to who I am. So, I was a dentist. I'll put some details down, but this is where I fiddle around at the moment, just trying to promote prevention, and so I'm hoping we can help one another. So, let's see how we get on. So, this is me, just after pre-clin. So, we just started up in the hospital, and then it would be 3 years later, that's me again, qualified in Cardiff. And from there, I went to work for, well, it was just 8 months outside Caerphilly in a satellite practice. I didn't get a huge amount of support, to be fair. And two things that struck me was one, that I was told I ought to just crack on with the treatment, not wait till people had their oral hygiene together, otherwise I wouldn't get paid and neither would they. And the other was when I did a GA session, and I think we saw about 16 children in under 2 hours. One of the most horrific things I ever went through. Anyway, I moved on to Bristol, and again I worked here. There was no supervision, but everything was good. It was sterile, but the place was a bit grotty, and that meant that I ended up in front of the GDC after I asked a patient to complain about the premises. And the GDC, being the GDC, they fined me the equivalent of 2 weeks' wages, even though I paid my principal. So we parted company, and I went to work at this practice in the centre of Bristol, and the principal there was excellent. He was I think he was the chairman of the Pankey Institute for the UK, which was all about occlusion, and he had his own dental lab. And because I wasn't wildly busy, I used to go to the lab just to compare how my preps compared to everyone else's. What was interesting was that I saw a lot of work from the dental hospital there. And what people show you isn't necessarily what they do. And so that was quite an interesting experience. One of the other guys that I worked with, who was a bit younger than me, he ended up going to Vancouver, and he took on board a lot of what was taught there. And he was kind of high-end dentistry and used to go to Wimpole Street every month, fly there from Vancouver just to look after a few patients. But I went to what was called the Amalgam Factory, which was here in the Wells Road in Bristol, and I was a partner there for about 9 years. And I actually had a few other practices in my practicing lifetime, but I wanted to do NHS work. I went to the inaugural Denplan meeting in Bath around that time, and the partners, they all wanted to go down the private plan route. And I didn't, and so basically I ended up moving my goodwill over a year period, and I bought a house not far from here, well, about 2 miles, and this is it. And this was up the road. I bought a semi-detached house, and then had it converted, so it became a 4 surgery practice. I took my patients, bought the goodwill of a practice that was falling apart around the corner, and we were very successful. But I was always interested in prevention, and this is an ozone machine that some of you may be familiar with, but probably aren't. And clearly, you don't get paid for that using this on the health service. That didn't get paid for it, to be frank. But it was a really good idea, and I've got it in my garage if anyone wants to buy it. I also had a preventive unit, so we had someone who became an oral health educator. And that's what we were trying to do. This was our group, I think it was around 1995, and I like to think we were a happy bunch, and I certainly enjoyed working there. So we were bursting out the seams after 10 years. We were a training practice, and so I was only working 4 days a week because there basically wasn't room. So we approached the area team, and they said they would give us part funding to build an extension for 2 surgeries, and that's what we did. But it took a year, and at the end of the year, of course, the goalposts have moved, and we weren't given the capital funding, and we weren't given any extra UDAs, which basically meant that we were going to go bankrupt. So, and this happens in lots in life. Sometimes you just have to review things, and you have to change. And so that's when we became what's kind of called a mixed practice. And the way that we went around that was well, we bought some digital equipment. So one of the advantages was, well, it does the lab work for you. And so I had what was called a blue cam. Now you have the Omnicam or the Prime Scan, but these are fantastic bits of kit. But yeah, this is when I made a temporary bridge, and it was still there, 8 years, and then I left, so I guess it's still there. The interesting part was it was what I was taught by, I would say, who was my mentor, was you can't quite see that on the scan, but there's a sinus there, and every now and again these sinuses would flare up on these post crowns, and they've been flaring up for 30 years. But that's better option than having the denture or having the teeth removed, and well, she couldn't afford implants. So this temporary bridge is made out of acrylic. It's not made out of any other sort of hybrid material. And I guess you can still do these. But she was extremely happy with it. And it's how do you use this kit? So lots of you will have bought these scanners, which are far easier to use than this ever was. This one you had to spray powder everywhere, and now you all use scanners, or many of you do, for orthodontic work. And of course, with the orthodontic work, it's great when it goes well, but if it goes wrong, even though it's been designed by the computer to a large extent, you're responsible for it. And so it's a bit odd. Oh, you can see the sinus there. Right, so these different materials, especially with the adhesives, can be used in a different way. And so I also use them for erosion cases and teenagers with occlusal veneers. It's just a shame I left the practice, and I'm not 100% sure how well they worked. But either way, it didn't remove any of the tooth tissue. So there's a picture of me just how it worked. You can see that it's actually kind of falling apart there, my old blue cam. And this is on a member of staff. I didn't take out any of her teeth if you look at the picture closely. But there are lots of things that you can do, and my patients really like them. So I went here to learn a little bit more, and at the show, I had a problem in that I couldn't get some of the materials that I wanted, and it wasn't because the materials were failing. It was the dentists who were failing to use the materials correctly, and I think the lawyers got on the back. So that's got a familiar ring to it. But yeah, I'd go to the States. It was an interesting 3 days, and I learnt a lot. And this is just to show you, I mean, this is the second camera I had. The first camera I had, I think, cost about £7,000 and was with Wi-Fi. The one on the left is the one I connected with USB in the end. And the smile light you can see at the bottom works with your mobile smartphone. But the picture at the top, that's done with a camera that I bought on the internet for £40. And that's the thing about technology, it does come down in price. And you have to say these are pretty good. Now these would be quite useful really when you consider how much it costs for an electric toothbrush. You know, £40 for one of these isn't bad. We now spend more time providing what patients want, rather than what the vast majority probably need. And the app works for both, so it's basically a way for people to monitor their oral health and also give them a nudge to check themselves for oral cancer. And clearly these are just my ideas and what I provide for my patients, but with your collaboration and input, it can only improve. So I hope you find it useful, and I hope you use it, and I hope you share it.